Yeah, no.
Jackie's not coming?
No.
Are you sure that Pat's on her way?
Yep.
Yeah.
She said, I'm on my, sent from my road. Whenever she, what? Sent from my road. Yes, no, she's coming. What time is it? Yeah, no, we're getting started. Let's get started. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming, those that are here. And those that are watching, thank you. We actually had a very momentous day unloading an incredibly huge, large, city-size playground set.
How awesome is that?
This is awesome.
So awesome. That's
Awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
We need to post like a picture,
Before the stages.
the stages, but also like the end, the picture that you sent, and that picture doesn't do it any justice. Once you start picking up those slots, this thing is
Massive.
massive.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way it's fitting over there.
No, it's gonna have to go back there in the back. Right there where it's unloaded, between all the trees, yeah.
Yeah, that's where it seemed like a good spot. What? And it's got a huge slide. Who wanted, not the slide, swings? Who wanted swings? You wanted swings.
I love swings.
It's a big swing set. It's like a 30-foot swing set.
Heavy duty ones, not the.
I asked him, I said, how are we going to put this together? Do we have like instruction manual or something? He's like, he said, no.
Instruction manual.
What? Hold up.
I was thinking it would be like the table that there's the chairs that we just put together for Vanessa. Oh. Anyway, that'll be exciting. Hopefully we'll bring some new kids, and I'm assuming the kids from next door will be on it
That'll be good too.
quite often. Maybe they can move their food truck in between, so we don't have to walk so far. Hi, Pat.
I didn't know I was gonna be here either, but I made it.
I had company at the house.
Ah.
I couldn't seem to get out of the house.
Yeah.
You're here, that's all that matters.
Hey, Ray.
Hey.
How are you?
Pretty good.
I like that shirt.
It is
Yeah.
a pretty cool shirt.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to like it.
All right. Well, good. Again, welcome. We are actually, Lizanne, I asked you what we were starting. That's what I had, but for some reason, when I read it, I'm like, I feel like we did this last week, but it's not.
Oh, that's right. I marked it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
12:42. So we're in John, Book of John, chapter 12, starting on verse 42. Book of John is a lot different than the other books. Have you guys enjoyed the Book of John?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
The way he writes? I love how John writes, because he's so I always think John thinks very highly of himself as like the best disciple as he talks about himself. But we're starting in verse 42. The title is Walk in the Light. Prior to this, if we give a short little synopsis right before this, who's Jesus speaking to? Do we remember who he's speaking to throughout this entire section and group? Do we recall?
Mary and Martha.
Yeah, right before this, we spoke about, if you recall, we had Lazarus.
Yeah.
And the plot to kill Lazarus, as they were trying to remove any form of evidence, if you will. Remove all the evidence, remove the idea that of who Jesus was, and they put a plot to kill him. We then have the next section where we talk about the triumphant entry with Jesus, which we also find the prophecies going back to Isaiah about him coming in on a colt, if you recall, which was very different than the other ones. If you remember, I think it was Mark or Luke that talked about, which one was it that they said Jesus told them to go down and find a colt and asked to tell the people that it's for me. And it was a much longer dialogue of I'm sorry?
Mark. It was one of the first ones.
Yeah.
Matthew and Mark.
And we find in this one, it was Jesus, when he had found a young donkey, sat on it as it was written. So it's very much shorter descriptions here in John. As we continue, let's go into verse 42, which is the walking in the light. Remember, the Pharisees are the ones that are going after him. This is who he's been fighting with. The dialogue that he's had, who they've been trying to catch him, and get him into a corner so they can go after him. Verse 42, nevertheless, even among the rulers, many believed in him, but because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue, for they loved the praise of men more than the praise of God. Right up front. We're going to stop there. Even among the people that believed in him, they're denying him. Do we find that today in the same place? In this, they're talking about the synagogue, a group, right? So we can talk about this in the manner of speaking. The synagogue is just like any group that we're in, any group of friends we're in, any group, a club we're in, any social setting that we're in, right? Once you're in a social setting around people, our belief, even if you believe, we start dampening that belief when it comes across to people that don't, right?
But you got to remember something. The synagogue was the center was the hubbub. And so being put out of the synagogue was not just like you're being shunned or,
Sure.
I mean, it was a great deal.
Absolutely. So yeah, the synagogue, even today, the synagogue is a serious thing. I think we talked about this before. I think I brought this up a few weeks ago when we talked about the Jewish community centers. Today, right? The JCC, that's what they call it, right? It is a club that you want to be in, and if you're extradited from this club, if you're excommunicated from this club, it's a big deal because you're being excommunicated from, a very serious club, if you will. In the same manner, is it not in our own minds, whatever clique we're in, whatever group we're in, think of your own friends. Think of the group of friends that you might have, right? In the same manner, we sometimes we feel like we're stepping on eggshells around them. We don't want to say too much because we don't want to be put out of that group. We don't want to be shunned from that group. And in the same manner, that's what's happening here, right? Because they love the praise of men more than the praise of God. We love to hear praise from men, right? Shoot, it's even one of the 5 love languages, is it not? Words of aspiration, right? Affirmation. Aspiration. Words of affirmation, right? It's one of the love languages. We love to hear that we're pretty. We love to hear these things, right? We love to hear praise. And if we're too busy listening to the praise of men, we forget that we can't hear both, right? You can't listen to God and men at the same time, right? You can't love one and the other. That God is very specific about this. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Verse 44. Then Jesus cried out and said, "He who believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me. And he who sees me sees him who sent me. I have come as a light into the world, that whoever believes in me should not abide in darkness." Okay, I know this sounds obvious, but who is he speaking about? He who believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me. Who is him who sent him?
God.
God's coming.
God the Father, right?
Mhm.
It's important when we're going through these things to make sure that we understand exactly what he's talking about. As it sounds very simple to us, but to those ears that have not heard, right, it can get kind of confusing. You know?
Actually acknowledging God's will here,
Sure.
because
Well, here's the other thing, Ray, and I like where you're going with this. Remember, he's speaking to the Jews.
Yeah.
Jews believe in God. That they believe in God, right?
yeah,
So what is Jesus doing by going back? He's saying, hey, if you believe in me, you're not believing in me, but you're believing in God. You already believe in God, so why are you not believing in me? He's putting it back on them, right? Because they have a foundational principle of believe in God. Yeah. We can even say that today, right? The Jewish foundational principles of Judaism is a belief in God of the Old Testament, who is the creator, who is the same God that we believe. Yes. So he is really putting it back on them and just basically saying, hey, if you're able to see God as you say you are, then you can see me. If you believe in, and if you believe in God, then you believe in me, right? He's also going down the road again of he who believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me. He's creating that oneness of him and God, that they are not just they're not separated, but they are one,
right.
And if anyone hears my words and does not believe, I do not judge him, for I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. He didn't come to judge the world, but to save the world. But who is judging the world? Whose job is that?
God's. Not his job, God's.
God? Who's the door?
What did you say?
Who's the door? The doorway. As he speaks about it, who's the doorway? Who's the only way in is through Jesus, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But as he is saying, that doorway is to save, not to judge. Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah.
God's the doorway.
He who rejects me and does not receive my words has that which judges him. The word that I have spoken will judge him in the last day. This statement is very, very interesting. Who is he saying is the judge?
God.
God is the judge, but is he saying God's just going to be judging, or we have a choice? Who does not receive my words has that which judges him. Oh, good Lord. What just happened?
Well, okay, so you're talking about the word is the standard by which the judgment is made. So,
I don't know what I just hit, but I literally just...
Well, they also judge themselves if they don't do what the Old Testament says, including the Ten Commandments. Then they're choosing to not follow God.
Right. I want to say it like that. Think of it like this, where he says that the word that I have spoken will judge him in the last day. The word that I've spoken. Okay. If you break the law and the letter of the law states you cannot do X, right? The judge is not judging you, right? He is just a placement to pass sentencing, if you will, right? You yourself have been judged by the letter of the law, by the word of the law. There's nothing the judge is going to do to change what you've done. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Does that make it clear? So he's stating, I'm not the judge. God the Father's there, yeah. But here is the law. This is the letter of the law that in which you have to abide. This is what we are supposed to be, what we're doing. Yeah, what you're supposed to do. And that I'm not judging you. You already know what you're supposed to do.
Mhm.
If you choose to break that,
Mhm.
you're choosing that judgment. You're choosing, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I reading that, I want to tie that back into 46. 46 says, I have come as a light into the world, that whoever believes in me should not abide in darkness.
Oh, should.
Look at that word should.
Uh-huh.
Notice it says, if you believe in me, you should not.
Right.
Not will not.
Right.
That's a huge distinction.
It's huge. It means you have a choice,
Yeah.
right?
I can believe the word, I can accept the word and still do my own thing.
That's right.
Woo!
This is
Now
why
it ties into the rest of it in terms of
Yeah.
you believe me, you have all this. I didn't come to judge you, but
right.
now you believe me and you did not do. Now you.
Oh, that's
That's a really, really good point. We have that choice is given. And something else that I don't know why this is being pressed on me to bring up. It's in the same manner, and especially with Jesus and how he speaks about the marriage to, that this is a marriage that he has with the church, right? In the body of Christ. If we think about it in the same way, we have, when you get married and you take vows, you have a set of guidelines that you should operate in, right? You should not be in, I'm not going to use darkness, I'm going to use doghouse, right? You should not be in the doghouse if you follow these simple things, right? And you have this outline. And it's very much the same that you can be in a place where you believe, but you have a choice to whether you're going to make the appropriate steps or you're going to step out of line. Right?
That's why I was stating it. He isn't the judge. It's the words that are spoken. That is what is what judges you by what he has said. Remember that God's word doesn't go out void. It always returns in one form or another. So in this case, he's saying, you believe in me, but it isn't me that's most important. It's what I have said and what's also contained here. And so,
All right, we're at verse 49. And Ray, I understand exactly what you're saying. There's two parts. Remember, it's like this. The same goes with the. You've got to think of the legal system. We have the spirit of the law and the letter of the law, right?
yeah, and
They're two different functions. Letter of law is something that's written, spoken word. Spirit of the law is intent, right?
Back then, in the Old Testament, you're dealing primarily with the letter of the law.
Yeah.
See, that's
Well, the
where-
Pharisees would always operate under the letter, and that's what they based their
right.
righteousness on, was the letter of the law. But their spirit, their intent was, and even today in the legal system, if if you break the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, you're going to get a different sentence, because the spirit of the law is broken by intent. The letter of the law may just be, I don't know, one of the 122,000 laws that are created, and I broke the law, right?
See, here's
So-
here's the neat thing. I'm sorry. But here's the neat thing about this.
Mhm.
This is where the cross and his resurrection, it doesn't do away with the letter of the law, but it makes that law so that it is more based on the spirit of the intention. It's written in your heart, not written in paper and in stone.
He replaced much of that, right? He became the replacement.
Yeah.
Like the replacement for circumcision, the replacement for many of the different laws that were there. Okay, moving on. Verse 49. For I have not spoken on my own authority, but the Father who sent me gave me a command, what I should say and what I should speak. And I know that his command is everlasting life. Therefore, whatever I speak, just as the Father has told me, so I speak.
Again, he's doing the will of his Father.
There's such a submission there.
Yeah.
He is telling you that he has authority. I have not spoken on my own authority. In other words, I have authority to speak,
Mhm.
but I'm not speaking on my authority. I'm speaking on the command. He was told, this is what you're to say.
Yeah.
The submission that the Son has to the Father.
Mhm.
And that in itself is kind of foreign to the Jewish.
Well, what's foreign is the humility.
Yeah.
The humility is what is foreign to them. They don't.
Because when
they
you
don't-
consider somebody that has position
Mhm.
or power, authority,
Yeah.
right? You don't necessarily think of them submitting to someone else.
Right.
In
Huh.
fact, that's least likely because of my position.
Right.
That's where that pride comes into play, right? The arrogance of who you think you are.
That was the. I'll just tell you a very quick story on that. That when I started working in China and spending a lot of time working in banking in the government, there was this the most awkward scenario that I ever encountered, and that was people in positions of authority serving you tea, serving you. They were the ones that were serving you when you went to dinner. We're talking about the people that would normally have servants doing this or staff doing this, and they're the ones getting up and grabbing the teapot and serving it. And it was very strange until you realize why they did it. And it's exactly what, the way that Jesus is, right? It's that servant, that subservient attitude of, hey, if I'm going to show you, if you're to be a servant, if you're going to be in authority, you need to know how to be the best servant, right?
You've got a
If you're
primary example of the Roman officer who told him, hey, you know what, go ahead and just take care of it, because, look, I got men who I tell them to do this, I tell them to do that, and they go do it. Okay? And the same applies here. Jesus is under the same authority,
Mm-hmm.
but he's under the authority that God has given him, but he submits that to God.
And this is what happens when you do that. And we're going to see, right, as we move into chapter 13, exactly what that does. When we are subservient to God, God gives us authority. We have authority to do many things, right? However, when we are, when we show humility and when we're humble and we put ourselves in the right place, we can see what happens with Jesus after he does all this. We go to chapter 13. The chapter is Jesus washes the disciples' feet. Right? it goes right into an area where we see Jesus being in the same manner, acting as a servant and being in that position, right? And it's not a position of a lower position. Serving is not a low position, right? We think it is. We complain about it sometimes, like it is, but it's really it's the highest honor to be in a place that you're serving, right? All right, let's go. Let's move on. 13. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Have you guys ever wished you knew when you were gonna, like if you knew when you were gonna die, what you'd do? If you had this amount of time left, this amount of time left.
Make sure you say I love you and goodbye.
Yeah. Like, does anybody have a bucket list? We got to think that Jesus may, like, I understand he had exactly what he was command from God, and he is God, and this is what he was here, but he's still human, right? Can you imagine there were still probably things he was like, I really wanted to do that. I just wanted to try it once, right? Before he's supposed to be going. But he knows exactly when he knew that his hour had come, that he was done, that his ministry was done, that he was taking, and I really look at this, that his hour has come. It's this season has come. This season is now passing to a new season, right? The old needs to go away. If Jesus, in the manner that many of us hold on to things from the past, and yes, I'm speaking about me right now, me holding on to things that you have, it doesn't allow you to step through that door moving forward, right? Imagine if Jesus didn't want to let go of the past, what he was doing, that ministry, that service that he was doing, and that hour that had come, and he realizes this hour has now come, that season's done, and now this season has to take precedent. If he didn't let go of that past season, could this new season happen? I don't think so, right? Verse 2, and supper being ended, the devil, having already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel with which he was girded. Then he came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, Lord, are you washing my feet? Nope. Very quickly, before we go into that, Jesus knew that Satan was already in Judas's heart, that he was already present. We remember when we go back a couple chapters, he's already brought him up, right? Remember Judas said, asked about the oil. Jesus knows the spirit that's in him. Can you imagine how difficult it was for Jesus to wash his feet? Right? Knowing he was being betrayed, but also knowing the spirit that was in him. Right? It's just an incredible, if you really think about it, like, could you do the same thing? Can we do the same thing? We're asked to do the same thing, right? Can you wash the feet of your enemy? Can you put aside all those things that have happened and what were done to be able to move forward, right? Because unless you put that aside, you can't move forward. Just like Jesus could not move forward unless he put that aside. Verse 7, Jesus answered and said to him, what I am doing, you do not understand now, but you will know after this. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered, if I do not wash you, you have no part with me.
Ooh,
Whew. Man.
there's that pride of Peter.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The pride that you're not going to wash my feet. You're my master. I'm not going to let you wash my feet.
And that is a great point. He is not saying, how many times do we say something like that and we make it seem like it's for the other person's benefit, but it's really for protection of our own pride. That's exactly what Peter was doing. You're not going to wash my feet. Yeah, exactly.
Was he embarrassed?
Probably.
Well, I think there's a couple of points. Like, number one, we have this idea in our head, number one, of seniority, right? This person's higher than me and he's washing my feet. This shouldn't be happening, right? Like, remember, there's still also, there's class was a very big thing then.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
he was getting embarrassed because he was over him,
Mm-hmm.
that he had to humble himself to wash his feet was an embarrassment to him that put him in that situation.
I think it's also, you must be vulnerable. There's an incredible amount of vulnerability when you allow somebody else to care for you in a certain manner, right? And I think that, along with Peter's pride, like Pastor said, Peter was that was like his thorn, was pride. The big problem with him. He was always trying to protect his own ego, his own skin, which is why he denied him. That's why, but he also knew exactly who Jesus was. That's why he asked him, well, who do you think I am? And Peter's like, well, you're Son of God, you're Christ, you're the Messiah. He knows exactly who he is, right? So but Peter hadn't gotten it yet, that, listen, if you're going to be in a position of power and authority, you need to be the best servant. He hadn't learned that yet. Or he hadn't accepted it yet. He might have learned it, but he hadn't accepted it yet.
So,
Verse 9, Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head.
That's kind of a Jewish.
So quick. If I do not wash you, you have no part of me. Oh, okay. Well, in that case, you need to wash everything.
What?
Everything.
Yeah, that's kind of a Jewish thing there. I mean, it's sort of their Jewish kind of humor.
Jesus said to him, he who is bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not all of you. For he knew who would betray him. Therefore he said, you are not all clean. So when he had washed their feet, taken their garments, and sat down again, he said to them, do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so am I. You say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who has sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. He's very much a do as I do, not as I, right? This is one of those areas where we have to recognize very, very quickly that if we are going to be walking like Jesus, we need to act like him. We need the actions that he took, we need to follow suit, not just in word, but in deed, right? And we need to do those things even when people aren't watching, even when nobody's around.
Yeah.
There's I saw a little poster that had Jesus on it that said, I saw that. And we need to recognize, even when we're not around other people, that God is always with us, watching us. And our actions are always should follow the same actions when we're alone versus other people, right? All right. Verse 18. Jesus identifies his betrayer. Hey, Pat, what does your title say on that one?
It doesn't. It's in
doesn't?
the bottom. It's in the Yeshua washes the disciples' feet, and it goes all the way to 21.
Okay. I was just curious. Okay, verse 18. He identifies his betrayer. Obviously, he already knew the betrayer. He's known the betrayer. And now he's going to identify him. Because once you identify your betrayer, there ain't no going back, right? You can't go back with it. And once he identifies him, what do you think, even before we read it, what do you think Judas is going to do when he gets identified? Is he going to argue or is he going to run? Flee. Well, we know that he flees, right?
He leaves, and the other disciples think he's about his business since he's the
They don't realize.
money man.
Let's read it. Let's see. Jesus identifies his betrayer. I do not speak concerning all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but that the scripture may be fulfilled. He who eats bread with me has lifted up his heel against me. Now I tell you,
41:10.
I'm sorry,
It says Psalm 41:10.
Psalm 41:10.
Mhm.
Oh, that scripture. Yeah.
No, I'll find it.
Now I tell you before it comes, that when it does come to pass, you may believe that I am he. Most assuredly, I say to you, he who receives whomever I send receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. Here he goes. Here's Jesus going again, right? Using the authority, but also putting it in the context of God, right? When Jesus had said these things, he was troubled in spirit and testified and said, most assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me. Then the disciples looked at one another, perplexed about whom he spoke. I want to bring up one thing here. If we see how it's written and how Jesus is speaking about a betrayal. We also see how he didn't speak about it being betrayed by Peter when Peter denied him. He doesn't say Peter betrayed him, right? So we have to understand the deepness of the betrayal, right? The depth of the betrayal. There's no going back from this betrayal, right? We can come back from things that we have done. We can even, obviously Jesus forgave Peter for denying him, right? But but the betrayal is something much deeper than that, yeah? Because he doesn't use those words, betray, when he talks about Peter denying him and others doing things that we ourselves as physical beings would consider a betrayal to a certain extent, right?
Did you
Yes,
want
ma'am.
me to read Psalm 41?
I'm sorry?
Did you want me to read Psalm 41:10?
Sure.
My own familiar friends, I whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you look at there's a couple of times where Jesus talks about somebody betraying him or, making that kind of statement. I'm wondering if he was trying to get Judas to admit it, or to be more open about it.
I don't think you want them to admit it,
I think
because that would blow up the whole scene.
Granted, but he kept mentioning, but hey, somebody's going to be betray me.
I think when we're dealing with Judas, we have to recognize that the Bible and what scriptures are very, very specific about the spirit in Judas.
Yeah.
The spirit of Judas being Satan himself, right?
Yeah, because the other
Is it-
disciples were wondering, am I going to be the one
Yeah.
who does it?
This is a
And
different
they were-
spirit.
I know
Right.
that, but they were still wondering, because Jesus said, one of you will betray me. And they're
Right.
going, oh my goodness, I hope I'm not the one.
But,
You know,
even,
like,
but even there, Judas also does the same thing. What? Am I going to be betraying you?
he does?
Remember, Jesus had been telling them all along that he was going to die.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand it. It wasn't comprehending. It wasn't revealed to them yet. So even in this stance, as Jesus is saying it, they're like still in disbelief, not really understanding. What do you mean? Who? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Right? We've been together all this time. We've shared all these experiences. You've given us power and authority. We've gone through all these things. Here you are washing our feet, and you're still talking about somebody's going to betray you. I don't understand. What are you
Right.
talking about, Jesus?
Yeah. And why are you just bringing it up now?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you found out somebody's betraying you, you're not going to wait. Right? You're gonna call them out on it pretty quick. Yeah.
It depends upon what kind of an end you want.
Depends on what kind of end you want. But the majority of people,
I'm gonna call them out.
you're gonna call them out. Chicanas are gonna call them out.
I'm thinking about something. I'm thinking about something else.
All right. When Jesus said, I'm sorry, verse 23. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples, whom Jesus loved. Simon Peter therefore mentioned to him to ask who it was of whom he spoke. Then leaning back on Jesus' breast, he said to him, Lord, who is it? And Jesus answered, it is he to whom I shall give a piece of bread when I have dipped it. And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, son of Simon. Now after the piece of bread, Satan entered him. Then Jesus said to him, what you do quickly. Who is he speaking to?
Judas.
Is he speaking to Judas though?
Satan?
He's speaking to a spirit, right?
Yeah.
And we know this because it's very specific to make sure to tell us that Satan entered him when he, right? Now, what's very interesting to me, and I'm gonna look this up because I'm just, there's a difference between devils, demons, and Satan, right? When we're speaking about demonology and whatnot, the word for demons and the word for devils and the word for Satan are all different. And in John, it's very specific to speak about devils putting it on the heart of Judas to betray him. And then it specifies that Satan enters his heart. And I believe that they're different words in Greek, that we are speaking about an authoritative transition between as we gradually get more important, as the job becomes more important to Satan, he stops passing it off to his minions and steps in himself. And once he steps in himself, that is when Jesus speaks directly to him and says, whatever you got to do it quickly.
That sounds like with the Antichrist.
Yep.
Let's get her done.
So,
There's something that just kind of triggered me.
Uh-huh.
At the beginning of 13, he says in verse 2, and supper being ended, the devil having already put it into his heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him.
Mhm.
So the thought was there,
He opened up his heart to it.
his heart was there, but I still think there was perhaps even a fear of doing it or carrying it out.
Sure.
Because over here on this side is, what did it say?
When Satan entered him?
Satan entered him.
Yeah. Now, after the piece of bread, Satan entered him.
And after
He
he took
became-
the morsel, then Satan came into him.
Yeah.
Then Yeshua said to him, "You must do quickly what you are to do."
Yeah. It changes from a, because here's
It's not
the,
just the thought, it's now it's the action.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it. I'm going to go ahead and do it now.
and it's an amazing point, because we have to understand this also, that there is laws that God creates that he cannot break, right? He can't break it. That if he can't break it, Satan can't break it. But one of those is free will, right? And it's important to understand that what you were just saying, like the thought was put there, it was placed on his heart. It was, right? That temptation was there for him to betray. And that's what it was, a temptation, right? Hey, look what you're going to earn, right? Here's this temptation. And then he makes that decision. Like you said, he chooses. Okay, that's the free will. He just chose. And when he did, that's when Satan was able to enter into him, right? That gateway was open and he poured right in. And when he did, Jesus knew exactly who he was speaking to, right? Because before that, he never said, hey, he never said Satan. He never called him out like that until he made that choice. And once he made that choice, that is the spirit of intent. When he made that choice to betray him.
Was part of his intent that he wanted the money from the scribes to betray him? I mean, he's a
Probably,
money person. He's
Money,
very, very greedy.
pride, position, power, right? Think of the power that you got if you're the one that brought down Jesus, right?
He must not have been very good. He killed himself or whatever. He committed
Well,
suicide.
Well, and there's some speculation with that as well, right? The speculation that
For
Going back to-
another day.
Going back to the thought that you were talking about, remember, many laid claim and knew who Jesus was,
Mhm.
but would not say it because of fears the Pharisees would do what?
They kicked him
Throw
out.
you out.
Yeah.
So you think about Judas, the acceptance
Mhm.
that he would feel, the validation
Yeah.
he would feel,
Yes.
knowing what the Pharisees were after, getting to Jesus,
Yeah.
and being the one that could deliver Jesus, because they knew that they were plotting. They knew that they were speaking. They knew that all of these different things. And in fact, Jesus was hiding, but not necessarily hiding, right? They were trying to avoid going to certain places because they knew that they were out to kill Jesus. So even the disciples knew what was taking place. So back to the validation point, this is Judas's opportunity to be accepted. Maybe not even money, it's just being accepted as, wow, all the Pharisees know who I am. All the Pharisees see me. I'm the gateway and I'm able to deliver something
Yeah.
that all these people have seen and want.
Power.
Power.
That's what he was after.
There it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he's already been to the Pharisees and got the 30 pieces of silver.
Well, we can also see how important we already talked about, and you're right, or that was that acceptance within the synagogue. If it's as powerful getting kicked out, staying in and becoming powerful within is worth more than any of that money.
And you know what? It was still interesting to me, even though Jesus had been saying that, and he was saying this all the way along. We've already read through 30,
Mhm.
right? They still didn't catch it. Jesus told them point blank, "It is he whom I shall give the piece of bread when I have dipped it."
Mhm.
He told him, "I'm going to dip the bread. Whoever I give this bread to, that's the one who's going to betray me."
I was weird
Mhm.
about that.
And what does it say? And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Now, after the piece of bread, Satan entered him. Then Jesus said to him, "What you do, do quickly." Now he just told you, "I'm going to dip the bread, and whoever I give it to." Now, you would have thought the disciples at that point would have said, "Grab him, seize him, don't let him leave, don't let him move. You're not going out of our sight." But what does it say? But no one at the table knew for what reason he had said this to him.
I think they were blinded
Yes.
purposely.
So again, we were asking the question, why he keeps saying this? How come nobody is recognizing it?
Yeah.
They were still blinded to it. So no one knew, and it says, for some thought, because Judas had the money box, that Jesus had said to him, "Buy those things for which we need for the feast," or that he should give something to the poor. Having received a piece of bread, he then went out immediately, and it was night.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He told you, "I'm going to tell you who it is. I'm going to show you who it is." And he
Right.
gave it to him. And they were completely blinded to the fact. Because again, if you told me who the betrayer is going to be,
Mhm.
and I'm going to identify him to you, you would have thought that they would have seized him, held
Right.
him. "You're not leaving. You're not going nowhere. We're not going to allow this to take place."
But also, they probably were just they didn't know what he was doing, and this is one of their boys. I mean, Judas was one of their boys.
We've been walking
Right.
together
We've
this
been-
whole time. How?
Yeah, this is
He
part of
was
our
at the same table with us.
and that going back, Pat, what you said about Judas, and we'll get to that where we find out that Judas ends up killing himself. We just found out Judas got possessed. We see that, right?
Mhm.
Satan enters into Judas
Mhm.
to the extent that this is the spirit of Judas now, and Jesus speaking to the spirit. Whatever you got to do quickly. What happens in possession like that? What happens when the spirit takes over, right?
Mhm.
Think of it on the good side. What happens when the spirit of God takes over you?
You're different.
You're different.
Yes.
When the spirit of Satan takes over you, guess what?
You're different.
And when that spirit leaves you,
Yeah.
You're
remember,
empty.
God promises not to leave you, but Satan, he use you and abuse you, and then
Kick you out.
he books it. So what do you think? Why do you think Judas was so upset?
Betrayed. He was no longer the position he wanted to be in. He was.
He had
Me.
no idea what he just did. He didn't. He was so. It was guilt.
Mhm.
It wasn't conviction. It was guilt.
Well,
Right? Shame of what he did, knowing what he did. Right? It wasn't as cool as he thought it was going to be.
especially when he goes, I don't remember if the book of John discusses it, but he goes to the synagogue and tries to give him back their
Mhm.
Right?
yeah.
Yep.
And the fascinating thing here about that, by the way, when Judas does take the money back and they don't take it, he throws the money into the synagogue. But the interesting thing was where he threw it was in the what's that called? The place,
In the synagogue, holy place,
the holy place, or the
holy of holies.
Holy of Holies. That's where the money got thrown.
Really?
There was a study when this one group of translators were working on this one Bible translation, and they studied this whole thing and that's what it ended up showing, that he actually threw the money into the Holy of Holies.
Okay. Go ahead.
A little bit of
All right.
there.
All right. Let's keep going. And does anybody have any questions on that? No. Any other comments?
What are we on
Nope.
now?
31,
We're doing
verse 31.
the new commandment.
So when he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and glorify him immediately. Have you noticed that every single time he speaks about himself, he speaks about God? Anytime he brings up him, it's God.
Because he always gives
Right.
God the glory.
Always. And that's exactly what we should be doing as well, right?
Yeah.
In every case. You know? Little children, I shall be with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. So now I say to you, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another.
Is that the same thing in the other version where they try to shoo the children away and says, don't do that?
No.
Let the children come unto me?
Mm-mm. That's a different section. I know what you're talking about, but it's a different section. One thing I want to just touch on here again is he's not telling us to love one another. Love one another or love people that love you, right? It's easy to love somebody that loves you. This is not what he's saying. Remember what he just did. He just washed the feet of Judas, the betrayer, who happened to have Satan inside of him.
Not then.
Hmm.
Satan came inside of him later. He washed his feet first.
He washed his feet first, right? And then immediately after, right? They're literally at the table.
Yeah. But he still had the desire to betray him in his heart.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And he even said it, one of y'all's not clean.
Yeah. One of you is not clean. He washed them anyway. Right? We have to recognize this. He's telling us to love one another, but he's also saying love your enemies, right? Now, obviously other verses have very specific say, love your enemies. But it's important for us to realize that with the actions that Jesus just took before he's saying these words, he's showing us exactly how to act within his own actions and then telling us, by this all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. If we don't have love for one another, how are other people going to know that we are disciples of Christ? If we don't show love, if we don't show compassion, empathy, all of the things that come along with love, there's no way that somebody that doesn't know God is going to see God, right? If we look at the verse that says God is love, we understand, and we also know when we read like in Corinthians where it's love is kind, love does not envy. He's speaking about God, right? And the love that we are supposed to show and the love that we're supposed to be.
Well,
And if you
loving
want-
a person
Mhm.
it's God loves the person anyway. But we don't love the sin that they're in. If they're in some kind of sin that is, the Bible says no. We don't
Mhm.
love the sin, but we love the person.
Well, in nowhere did Jesus say anything about loving the actions, good or bad. Has nothing to do with the person's actions, whether we're supposed to love them or not, right? Not at all. And it may be one of the hardest things that we do, right? It's really hard to love somebody that betrays you.
That's
Right.
that book I gave you,
Mhm.
Love Like You've Never Been Hurt.
Mm-hmm.
That's a true story. I have 4 books.
Mm-hmm. No. All right. Jesus predicts Peter's denial. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus answered him, where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you shall follow me afterward. Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. Lay down my life for your sake. Jesus answered him, will you lay down your life for my sake? most assuredly, I say to you, the rooster shall not crow till you have denied me 3 times.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Peter once again with his pride.
Pride.
I'm willing to lay down my life
Yeah.
for you.
Look at what I'll do for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that. And you know, something that just kind of caught me when Satan entered.
Mhm.
It could have said a demon entered,
Mhm.
or Satan sent a demon. But I think that the bigger piece is the conflict between the good and evil, right?
Mhm.
God versus Satan, right? The good and evil. Satan doing his part. If we think about Satan, we probably think about the most grotesque things,
Mhm.
like murders, like cannibalism, you know, eating things, just the worst of the worst. Like that has to be Satan, right? Satan entered him to do one little thing,
Mhm.
betray. That was it.
Yep.
Something so small. All he did was, I'll show you where he is. Come on.
He was deceived because if Satan knew that by killing him, he did what he came to do, he wouldn't have let him die.
Oh yeah. He had no understanding what was going to happen next. I'm going to kill the one that they caught, and I'm done with it. It's over. He didn't know that it was 3 days later he was going to rise up again and take, you know, power and authority, the keys to hell and the grave. And
If he had known that, he wouldn't have done
He
it.
was going to institute back what Adam had lost.
Mhm.
He had no idea. I'm going to do away with this guy and be done with it. That was his understanding of it.
We,
But for him to inject himself into this situation, Satan, just to do a betrayal.
mhm.
He knew that
That was
Jesus
it.
was the Messiah.
Yeah, he knew who he was.
Yeah.
Well, that's why.
What-
That's why he wanted to kill him.
Yeah, well, that's why Satan
Well-
did it as opposed to sending one of his.
This is actually a really, really great point because we believe that for some reason, we believe that there's equality between God and Satan.
No,
There ain't no equality.
no.
And we see that the disciples, how often are the disciples in a fog? They have no idea what Jesus is talking about. Well, the awareness comes from God. God is going to allow you to recognize what's going on or not, right? And it's just like that, right? Have you ever not been aware of something and you can't remember when you weren't aware of it, right? You don't remember a time when it was different, right?
Is that
Well-
also part of the Holy Spirit as far as the
Absolutely.
understanding?
Absolutely, right? The mysteries of it talks about it, right? The mysteries of the Bible come from God, right?
Yeah, because
We
once the
learn
Holy
those
Spirit
mysteries,
comes,
but we have to understand that Satan's in the same boat, right? His not understanding of what's going on is because God doesn't allow him to understand what's going on.
that's true.
So Satan's in this place, go like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna
that's
betray him.
what
Okay.
He thought he had him.
He
Yeah.
thought he had him.
Look now.
Yeah.
He thought he had him
If
like
he
multiple
knew,
times,
he wouldn't have
but
done it.
God is the one that allows that awareness. There was a time there certainly was a time when Satan became aware of what was happening, right? But it was only when God allowed him to. You know? All right, it's 8:15. Do we want to start on chapter 14?
15.
Can you imagine what Peter was feeling? Number one, Jesus had already humbled him once.
Small.
He had already humbled him once. Are you going to wash my feet?
Yeah.
No, you're not going to wash my feet. And then when Jesus tells him, if I don't wash your feet, then you have no part with me.
Yeah.
Well, yes, Lord, wash
Yeah.
my feet and my hands and my head too.
Everything.
I want to be part of you, right? So he was humbled there. And then I'll follow you. Where are you going? I will lay down my life for you, will you?
Yeah.
You'll deny me 3 times. Humble again.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Peter in his pride, no, I meant what I said.
Right.
I know who you are. I'll lay down my life for you. I'm going to follow you.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's
I think
interesting.
he really believed he was going to do it too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's that pride, right?
That's that pride.
That arrogance of thinking that Jesus already knew. That's why he told them, before the sun rises, you're going to deny me 3 times. Before the rooster crows 3 times, you're going to deny me.
Well, only because he couldn't follow him to the cross.
Oh, he didn't know.
I know, but I'm just saying, Jesus knew he couldn't follow him to the cross. So he had to show him the pride.
Yeah.
And the crowing 3 times.
But he says, you shall follow me
Later.
afterwards.
Mhm.
So what was Jesus talking about?
Death.
Where he was going to the cross? Death? Was
No.
Jesus talking about his ascension?
Both. Death.
Because he tells them later, I go to prepare a place for you so that where I am, you can be there one day also.
I want to bring one thing up. This is really interesting. What you're just talking about with Peter. We have to Satan. Remember, Satan is not in a position where he just knows things,
No.
right? He's in a position where he's been around a long time. So what he knows is just being around a long time. But one thing that is very interesting to me, and what we find with Peter, is we look at it as Satan just went to Judas, and like Judas betrayed him. No, Satan went around. He tried to poke every one of those disciples, and he poked Peter. Don't you remember when Jesus said, "Hey, Satan, get behind me! Get behind me, Satan." He said that to
I will
Peter.
never let that happen to you, Lord.
Yeah, Satan, get behind me.
Yeah.
He already spoke to him, right? It's very interesting. Like when we look at if we go to Peter, where it talks about this. Now we understand where Peter's coming from when he's speaking this. Let me read this verse, and we can say that from personal experience, we know Peter went through this. Be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour.
Mm-hmm.
Resist him, standing firm in faith, because you know that your brothers throughout the world are undergoing the same kind of sufferings. This is Peter talking about his brothers and what he dealt with, and finding that,
Finally having the realization,
recognize it. Man, that whole time, every time my pride came up, that was Satan trying to poke me into doing something, right? And now when we read that verse, now it makes complete sense, does it not? Because Satan did get to one of them. He got to Judas, right? Judas accepted it, and that's where he entered, right? But you can see how he was plugging at Peter. He was really trying to get Peter to be the betrayer, right? Would you say, Ray?
Also, the other fact that this is God's grace here, where he says
not
that
necessarily.
That's what he said.
Pride. Remember, each of them have their own flaws or deficiencies, right? Defects. And we see it many times in Peter that his pride always got in the way. Peter's mouth always got in the way. Peter's,
We could almost call it thorns. That
Just thought. I'm sorry, Ray.
I was just saying, this is where God's grace is being shown to Peter, because, let's see, what was that? I'll tell you what, you're going to betray me 3 times. How is it phrased? But I'll
Before the
no,
before the
after,
rooster crows,
it's after
we'll
that.
have the 3
after
times.
that,
Right. But he's saying something, but later on you're going to follow me, or
Well, if you think about it, Peter ends up being the one who leads them.
Yeah.
Peter's the one that ends up standing. So how is someone who denied him now end up becoming their leader? For the
Right,
simple,
but what I'm saying is
for the
God-
simple fact is that he humbled himself.
Yeah.
He had to come back to the recognition that I fell, I was wrong, I did wrong. The difference between him and Judas probably could have come back and said, guys, I messed that up bad. And I need forgiveness, and pray for me and cover me, because what I've done cannot be undone. But
mhm.
I need y'all to shelter me and cover me. But he didn't.
Right.
That's the difference
the
between.
only way he could not have done it is if he had betrayed the Holy Spirit, because the Lord says, you go against the Holy Spirit,
Correct.
there is no forgiveness.
Correct. And that's what I'm saying. So even for Judas could come back and been forgiven. But he was grieved so much that
Yeah.
He was very myopic.
It wasn't in their form.
Yeah. But the thing I was trying to mention was that God's grace was here because he was telling Peter, hey, you're going to do all this stuff, but you're going to follow me later. So it shows there that even though whatever Peter was going to do, there was hope for the guy. And
He knew Peter's heart, though.
I mean, he knew Peter's heart, and he knew exactly, but he knew the future too. And so that's what I'm saying. You're going to follow me.
And that was the reason why all of them were selected.
Yeah.
He knew what was in their heart. He knew what they had. Same as Judas. He knew why Judas was selected as well.
He was a money changer.
By the way, the term suicide, it turns out in Latin, it means self-murder.
Makes sense.
So are we done for the evening?
I think so, because we start a new chapter. We'll wait for the new chapter. We'll start
That was a
that.
little bit more bone on meat on that bone.
What's that?
That was a little bit more meat on that bone.
Yeah. Yeah, because the next chapter, it would be better to start and finish in the same setting with the subject. So, I'm gonna pray.
Yes.
I'm gonna
I
turn
have
this
a
off.
prayer
Thank you guys for joining us. What's that?
I have a prayer request.
I'm gonna go ahead and end this. So